All right, and our next speaker is Jim.
Before I start, everyone, who knows what this is? Anyone? Raise your hand if you've seen this before. All right. Congratulations, you're as old as I am. Yes. We'll talk about it later. So I'm going to start by apologizing. Okay. So I'm going to start by apologizing for those of you who've actually sat through an interview and had someone lean into the table and ask you, so what do you do in your spare time? And so if you've been there, this talk is for you. I will say this is actually not a lecture. This is a confession for me. So this is cathartic. I'm here to confess my sins in front of all of you. The inspiration for this talk came from a friend and coworker who, as people do on Twitter, was ranting about this question having been answered. And well, yes, I do have side projects, but how dare you ask me about them in an interview, and I'm umbrage and yada, yada, yada. And so the conversation hit me because I've been an interviewer and I've asked this question and I thought, oh, geez, yes, I know, it's bad, I know, but so I went on a long rant about why do I do this? And that was ultimately the genesis for this talk. Seems like everyone's done audience participation, so let's do audience participation. How many here who've been an interviewer? Okay, thank you for the hard work that you've done. Who's been taught how to interview? That's more than I thought. I honestly expected that answer to be none, so maybe this won't go as well. How many of you have asked this question in an interview? I mean, yeah, it happens. My name is Jim Wrubel, and I've done this. I'm sorry I asked this question. Also note that if you haven't asked this question, but you have stalked a candidate's GitHub profile, you have asked this question. So shame none on you, yes. So why is this a problem? So what's your spare time, right? Who knows what you're doing? You don't know what the person on the other end of this table is going through in their spare time. It'd be great if everybody had a side business and a hobby and develop libraries and a Git profile that was green as the grass and all of that. It would be great, right? But some people have got other priorities in their lives. They may be a single parent. They may be caring for an elderly person. They may be working a second job. They may be trying to get into this business. They may be an underrepresented person in this business. All of these things, that question really discriminates against them. And not to mention, it shouldn't matter. This shouldn't affect your job. What you do outside of your job shouldn't be a criteria for whether or not you get a job offer. It shouldn't. If you were interviewing a surgeon and you said, so what do you do in your spare time? And they were like, surgery. You'd be like, that's really weird. I might need to make some phone calls, But why is it okay for developers, But this is my confession part, it actually works. It's a pretty good predictor of somebody who's committed to their craft, who cares about producing good code. We just saw that last presentation. It actually works. And that's why you do it, right? I haven't found a lot of questions. When we think about statistical model, there's a level of prediction that goes into any particular interview question. This one, at least for the n equals, a couple hundred that I've done, it's actually a pretty good predictor. People who have outside interests that are technology related do tend to do better in their job. And so that's good, but the problem is there's a lot of people who could be really good on your team who don't have this, and you might be excluding them, and that's bad, okay? Yeah. So this is me putting on my former CTO and had budgetary responsibility and all those things. there's an enormous cost to making a hire and making a bad hire. I know it looks, especially these days, like corporations are just giant buckets of money and attorneys. They're not. I mean, these are real people. Especially the smaller you are, if you make a bad hire, it can be devastating financially to your company because that's a lot of money you've spent, and then you got to hire a new person. Developer salaries are, yay us, inflated, so that's good. But there's also a huge morale impact. If you make a bad hire, that is going to kill the morale of the people who've been doing the work because they're going to be carrying more load, and they were really hoping, because everyone's understaffed, they were really hoping that this person would be, able to contribute, and maybe they're not. So it can really make a difference. And so when I was originally doing this talk, my first thought is, oh, well, I'll just come up with a question that's better than this one, and I'll talk about that, and it'll be great, and everyone will learn something, and we'll be happy, and then we'll go to lunch. I can't. I haven't found a ton of questions that are better predictors, honestly. So I sort of struggled with this and thought, okay, well, what if I can't come? What if there isn't a better question? What if this is as good as technology interviewing can do? That would be really a shame, because look around the room, like, we're not represented across the board well. It's tough. It's a tough industry to break into. So you can't just change the question. You got to change the process. Also, rest in peace, Sir Alan Rickman, 1946 to 2016. Yeah. So speaking of flipping, here's the flipped interview. Slide 11, Jim finally gets to the point. So, yeah, this is the talk. That was all just me ranting, which, if you know me in person or online, is pretty common. Yeah, so the flipped interview, I put my thoughts on this onto a GitHub repo. It's honestly just a markdown file. There's no code or anything like that, because this is soft skills. But do go there, do check it out. The rest of this talk is going to basically be just reading that. So here we go. For those of you I don't know, which is in this crowd is actually surprisingly a lot, I worked in education technology, so we focused on education. We built software for struggling math students. And in that process, I got to learn about a technique that's popular in education called the flipped classroom. So in a traditional classroom instruction model, for those of you who've been to school, been to university, a boring instructor, let's call him Jim, will give you a boring lecture and assign you some boring homework, which you will have to turn in before the next boring class period, and the process will repeat itself for approximately a whole semester. In a flipped classroom, they're trying to take the boring part of it out of it. So you're still getting, the boring homework and the boring reading stuff at a time. You do that off hours, and you spend the face-to-face portion of the lecture in not a lecture format, but in a discussion. You're having dialogue, you're doing it as peers, you're reviewing that material, and you're learning not just from the instructor, but also from each other. So the underlying concept there is that we should use the face-to-face time, which is precious, for the most productive activities. Do the other boring stuff asynchronously. So the TLDR of a flipped interview is the same thing. So if you've been to a traditional interview, and I think it seems like all of you have, most of the time, you screen a candidate, you look at their resume, you think, okay, this is great. You bring them on site, and then you pepper them with a bunch of random questions that they've never seen before, and you think are good predictors of it, and they try to answer as best they can on the spot. If you're interviewing for technology, maybe you're doing a whiteboard exercise or something like that. So now they're trying to write code without the benefit of an IDE or tab completion or backspace or anything, just code, no IDE, none of their familiar. You've put them in a situation that is not reflective of the job and asked them to demonstrate capability. And that's ultimately what starts to hurt people who are newer to the industry, because they might have the ability to perform really well in the traditional job model, but they're not going to do well if they're put up on stage and something like this and asked to present or answer a question that they've not heard before. So don't do that. give them the questions up front. Let them answer, let them put thought into it, let them put their best effort into it, and then send them to you. And then when you get to the interview, review their answers. So, why change? If it's not already obvious, you want the interview process to match the job. As best as you possibly can, you want what's going on in the interview to be a good predictor of what actually working in the job is like. You're also being respectful of their time. You're not having to do multiple rounds of face-to-face interviews, maybe. If you're a remote organization, this model works a lot better because you're not spending a lot of expense on flights and travel and things like that. If you're doing a traditional interview, you're probably discriminating, whether you know it or not. I think most of us, at this point, know it. And you're also applying a level of statistics and rigor to your interview process that right now, frankly, just does not exist. Most interviews are gut hires. Again, this is a confessional. I've hired on gut feel before. It's not bad. That's what years of experience gives you, but it could be better. And if you're having multiple people interview candidates, giving them a neutral evaluation, letting them all look at exactly the same stuff and provide feedback based on exactly the same experience is a heck of a lot better. So, unless your job description includes write and debug high-quality code under constant threat of velociraptor attacks, your interview process is not working for you. It's not reflective of the job. So how does this work? The rest of this presentation, honestly, are the steps that I've put together. I will caveat here, this is actually not something I've done, so it seems like I'm over here talking about this. This is a theory. I have put pieces of this into place. There's not a lot of support for this type of model. The interview process is still pretty centered around bring someone in and pepper them with questions. So I'm personally both evangelizing this, but also recognizing that I have not done it. So I'm hopeful that some of you get a spark and decide to try this out, and I really want to know how it works. The next time I'm going to do it, but right now I don't have a chance, so I'm really hopeful that some of you will be guinea pigs and help build something like this. So these are the steps. Again, all of this, that GitHub repo I showed, a lot of this is there, so if you want to check Twitter or something, now's a good time because you can read online. So preparation step. First thing you do, let's agree on questions. Let's agree on what we want to evaluate. What are the questions? Bring all of your interviews together. Make sure they understand. Make sure they have a chance to contribute. Leverage tools to the extent that you can to eliminate biases from your questions. If you don't know Text.io, it's a pretty good service. Basically what it'll do is screen a job description or other blocks of text, and it will find inherent biases in them, and it will give you a score. So it's worth checking out. I don't have any affiliation with them. I'm not working for them, not plugging it, but it's definitely worth checking out. Field test to the extent you can. We are big in testing. We believe in testing, so do it in the soft stuff just like you do it in code. Do involve your HR department. They can help you not unintentionally get sued out of existence, which is definitely the end all of this process. Okay. Nope. Nope. There we go. Okay. Yeah. You ever seen that in Indiana Jones when he's filling the bag of sand? I feel like that right now. Get them. Oh God, this is gonna go horribly. I gotta find my cursor here. Screening. So when you get you post a job, you get candidates applying. They're gonna send you a resume and other information, portfolio, whatever they do. So you're going to want to screen them. You want to make sure that it's an actual human, and sadly, not a bot or something like that. When you screen candidates, and it's still a good idea, don't make it an interview. If you can, anonymize the screening process. If you, a lot of tools now will strip out name, location, age, or any of that sort of PII from a resume so that you can look at a candidate neutrally, just on experience, as opposed to prejudging them based on names or other revealing information. So try to do that if you can. Again, don't interview somebody, but you do want to communicate, especially if you're doing this type of process, since it's a little bit different. Your number one goal here is you want to make the candidate understand why this is different, why this is better for them. We're all in demand. This field has negative unemployment. So if you're in an interview process, you probably have other opportunities. You're hopeful to get across to the candidate, like, why should I wait for you? Why should I take a couple hours out of my evening and write down these questions? You've got to get that across. That's the point of a screen, is to keep them interested and engaged and warm in your process and really sell the opportunity. It's not about screening them out, it's about screening them in. When you send questions, give them as much time as you possibly can. Obviously, trying to make a hire, so you're trying to move as quickly as you can. You're recognizing that they're gonna need time to put in thought work, that they may very well have childcare or other concerns outside. This is why we aren't asking them about what they do in their spare time, because we want to respect their spare time. You're asking them in this process to do something for you in the spare time. You could pay them. You probably should. Find an hourly rate that works and then offer to pay them some amount of money that's in the grand scheme of how much it costs to recruit and hire somebody. That's a drop. That's nothing. So do that. Use an applicant tracking tool to the extent that you can. If you're doing, you used to do whiteboard interviews, use a code evaluation tool. There are a lot of them that work asynchronously now. I've got a couple linked here. I don't know how well that shows up in blue on blue, but CoderPad, Litmus, HackerRank, Testome, there's a bunch of them. Try them out, see how that works. Check for plagiarism. One thing you actually get when somebody responds in writing is you can actually evaluate it to see if it's original thought. I literally just got bit by this like a week ago, so one of the reasons I put that bullet in there was, again, confessional. I just got bit by someone who's plagiarized a job application. So do check. It may or may not be a disqualifying situation for you, but it's definitely worth checking. During the interview, what's going to happen is the candidate's going to show up either face-to-face or in a virtual meeting, and they're going to have submitted, hopefully previously, the answers to your questions. Maybe there's got code samples in it, maybe they've done an online code tool. This is your chance to sit down as a peer to them and just help them walk through what they think. What are they bringing to the... I swear I didn't do that. So your goal here, ask a lot of why questions. Not necessarily how, they looked up an algorithm. It's okay if they imported from a library that exists, like they didn't reverse a string themselves, they just did string.reverse, that's fine. Like, this isn't the point. Like, knowing string.reverse exists is actually valuable as a coder. But you do want to find out their thought process. You're looking for, how are they going to perform as a team? Are they thoughtful about what they did? Do they have a reason? Do they have opinions about what they did? Again, I'm a big fan of strong opinions weakly held. So you're probing for, I know what I did, and here's why I did it. If you tell me something that changes my opinion, then I will change it. But for the meantime, this is why I did that. I'm a big fan personally of interviewing as a group as opposed to a sequence of individual ones, more respectful of a candidate's time. I find the interpersonal dynamics of bringing a team together in those situations is pretty powerful. It gives the candidate a chance to see what it would be like to work as a member of the team. So who said that? So and then you avoid the whole Office Space Bob's thing, where it's like, across the table and all that nonsense. Like, you want a group thing. You want this person to feel like an included member of the team, and you want to give everyone that opportunity, not just your current favorite. Treat them as equally as you possibly can in the context. So have the same interviewers if you can. I know that's not always easy with schedules and stuff like that, but do that. Standardize the feedback process. This, again, confessional, is something that I really haven't done very well. I have not I'm going to pause when the screen pauses, and it will be like a record skipping. That'll be so standardize the feedback, right? Find some neutral scale, criteria that make sense. Ideally, they are tied to the job descriptions, which you all definitely have, right? Yes, everyone's got job descriptions for senior and junior and mid-level and manager. Yes, use those, right? Use tease those out and make those into your criteria. This person fits well in the following categories. Have your reviewers evaluate on those criteria, and then use the structured model to rank the candidates. Give them a score, 1 to 5, thumbs up, thumbs down, whatever really works for you is fine. It's best if you can help it, not for interviewers, not to talk to each other about the candidate before they submit their feedback. You want that to be as close as possible while it's fresh. You want it to be neutral if it can possibly be neutral. I know that's always hard. This is a personal process. This is a soft skill, so it's not going to be great. But when you're talking to your interviewers, try to impress the idea of please submit feedback quickly as best as you can. Don't discuss your results with other people, because you may unintentionally bias each other out of it. Happens a lot. So follow-up. Hopefully you made a great hire. This is still an art. We are all learning. We are all trying to get better at it, just like every other skill. So I'm hopeful that this process will give you better candidates overall, will give you a more inclusive candidate pool than having someone coming in. And I really hope it works for you. I'm very interested to know, if you try it, how it goes. Something I like a lot is hold a postnatum. So after you go through the interview process, you made a hire, you don't have to bring the person you hired in, because that's sort of awkward, but maybe. Hold a postnatum. For those of you who don't know what, people who talk about postmortems, I hate that term because it implies that person died. So a postnatum is a happy thing, right? After the birth, yay. So it implies success. Postmortem is a horrible term, don't ever use it, use this instead. So this is, if this is your agile feedback loop right here in your interview process. You're taking the results of it and you're using what worked and what didn't work to get better. And as developers and people who are here again on a pretty nice Friday, that's what we all want to do. So do use that part. So context, questions. Talked about my Twitter is relatively small. Hopefully you can read that. Again, the GitHub repo, it's just out there. It's a markdown file that contains a lot of the information that I described in here. Very interested to hear what you think works, what doesn't work. I've seen some people have already said, hey, it may actually discriminate against people to ask them to work outside of the interview. And I sort of get that. I have reasons why I think it's not so bad. But that is something here. So I'm really interested to make this part of dialogue, even though I'm for some reason standing on a stage behind a podium. This is intended to be both a confessional and a dialogue. So let's do that. If you have questions, I'll take them now. Yes, sir. In the back. So the question was, what happens if your interview questions get posted? I actually think the interview questions getting posted is a good thing. Candidate responses is, you know what, if they want to post them, I actually think that's fine. Um, I would check for the next candidate coming through. I would, Google it and try to see whether there was, in fact, they just copied someone else's answers. But I don't necessarily think it's a bad idea for someone to take another person's response to it and make it and personalize and make it their own. I don't think that's a bad idea any more than I think it's a bad idea for me to use a random JavaScript library I found, so I only have to write the next 10%. We're building on each other. The key is, are they presenting their authentic and original thought, even in that context? I think that's actually fine. Yes, sir.
I want to make a little comment because
Yeah.
I'm probably the oldest person here, but we're all get older.
I can't get much older.
My
Yeah.
only senior is like 78 years old. I've been programming for nearly 60 years. I'm a Microsoft expert, C Sharp and Entity Framework and so forth. I have put out in the last year 100 job applications, and I have yet to get an interview. The ageism in this industry is rampant.
Yes.
You
Yep.
can say all they want about diversity.
Yep.
But this age is a huge problem. And I don't care how skilled I am, I can't get a job.
You're absolutely right. This is
Problem that everybody's gonna face. Better make your money before you're 60.
underrepresentation covers a lot more than we would traditionally think about it. Thank you for saying that. That's important.
What are your thoughts on assessing a candidate's use of Google? Right, so we all use it. I don't know if
Yeah.
you ever admitted in an interview, but
No, I do. Yeah.
so, right, do you use it to copy and paste your code,
Yeah.
or do you use it to find the answer to educate yourself? Any thoughts?
It's that is a fine line. I skew more towards, if it exists already, use it. Don't write something that exists. Don't build another. NPM is jam packed with garbage. Don't do another. So don't make something that already exists. So I personally am fine, but what I'm looking for in this type of a model is the thought process. And I think if you don't have this dialogue at the end of this, what you're going to be doing is looking at it and saying, they clearly just Googled this, But asking them, like, what else did you consider, is a really interesting question. On top of why did you choose this, what did you look at and say, not good, not right, this is the wrong thing? So understanding a candidate's choices in the negative is also as important as figuring out what they do intentionally. Yes?
So if you have homework that's like coding homework, for example, do you have any thoughts on time boxing? We had a struggle with giving coding homework and then giving a rough guideline on how long we think it should take. And then some people spend more time and some people spend a more to the guideline, like really strict
Yeah.
interpretation. And I think that there might be demographic differences in how strictly you interpret the rules too.
Yeah.
So do you have any ideas on how to standardize or how to adjust for that?
So when I've done as close to this as I've done in a coding context, we have intentionally done sort of a Kobayashi Maru situation. There is way too much for you to implement in 8 hours. So do 8 hours worth of work. Tell us what you need to do to finish. I won't ask you to estimate because that's horrible, but at least tell you, like, what's left. Did they choose in that 8 hours to include tests? Did they choose to, did they choose to leverage a library so that they didn't have to write something low level as part of their 8 hours? Those are things that I'd be looking for. We have not done it as an exclusionary thing, but it's pretty obvious when someone has done more than 8 hours worth of work on a test that's intentionally designed to be not possible to complete. So we have actually downvoted people who did more work than that process. Again, art, not science, but it's done okay. Yeah.
Along with that, how do you deal with new developers who don't know what 8 hours of work of a senior developer is, and they have zero basis of comparison on, oh, that you gave me a test that you say takes 8 hours, I should be able to finish this in 8 hours.
Yeah. So, in terms of developer levels, you really want the assessment to be at their level. I wouldn't necessarily give a Kobayashi-Maru syndrome whatever, to a junior developer. Just wouldn't do that. That's just too much. You're intentional. It's like, yes, you're supposed to fail, but that's total slaughter. It's beaming them into the Klingon ship. Honestly, it's terrible. So what I would do in that sense is try and give them something a little more adapted to their level, and it might only be a 1 hour. Or in the case of junior developers, frequently I wouldn't necessarily assess their technical skills at that level anyways. I would want to see their thought process and whether they're teachable. Yeah, in the back.
How does the inverted interview process mesh with the STAR interview process? Would you still do that, the in-person situation, task, action, result, questions?
Never used it. Totally new to me. I will Google it though. No, so the intent here is whatever you fill the box with in an asynchronous model, use it. So it sounds like that's something that could be used to guide the questions themselves, not necessarily the process. This is more of a process than a what you're teaching. So I don't know if that's a good answer, but that's, you're like, oh, that's actually a screensaver. Yeah. Okay. I'm at time. Oh, yes, one more.
So your primary confession was regarding outside of your work time or project, right?
Yeah.
But one thing that's very important in this industry is the ability to learn. So what would be a way that you would assess that? Because often that's done outside of normal work time.
So I'd be looking for assessing their ability to learn when I'm asking them the why questions and when I'm asking them specifically what they rejected. To me, those are thought processes that will be an indicator of what are you inquisitive? Do you evaluate multiple scenarios and reject some? Do you get better over time? That's what I'm kind of looking for in those. I know that's not a great answer. Yeah.
I agree. I'd say it's sort of, I don't know, common knowledge or whatever. You should spend X amount of time learning, reading blogs, that sort of thing, learning about new frameworks and new
Yeah.
technology. So
As hiring people, we should be paying them to do that during their work hours.
I agree. But
Just
employers, so.
yeah. Don't work for those people. I mean, I know that's easy to say, and when you're negative unemployment, yay. Yes. Honestly, that should be a signal from the organization. Like, one of the things I would use in recruiting is we will pay you money to get better at your craft and do it on work time. Not. I know that's. This is a boulder at the bottom of the hill that we all gotta shoulder into and start moving it. The industry's got some bad practices, and we just need to work on them. Okay, with that, thank y'all. I'm out.